Imagine a castle that seems to have stepped straight from the pages of a Gothic horror novel. Sharp spires piercing the sky, pointed arch windows resembling a predator's eyes, and massive walls of gray limestone that appear to have absorbed the chill of the Hudson River. This is not a set from a Dracula movie, nor a medieval fortress in Europe. This place is just 40 kilometers from New York, in the quiet town of Tarrytown. Its name is Lyndhurst, but at the end of the 19th century, local residents and journalists whispered that this estate was the devil's lair. Why? Because its owner was a man whose name made grown men pale and investors clutch their hearts. Jay Gould, a name that in 1880 was synonymous with absolute evil in American finance. Newspapers called him the Mephistopheles of Wall Street. Cartoonists depicted him as a giant spider ensnaring the railroads of the entire country in its web. He was hated so passionately that this feeling bordered on religious fanaticism.
It seemed impossible that such a man could even exist. He was short in stature, quiet, with a dark beard and piercing black eyes, in which, according to contemporaries, warmth never reflected. But it was precisely this man, cursed by millions, who created within these gloomy Gothic walls a world full of paradoxical tenderness and love, of which no one outside his family even suspected. We are used to thinking of historical figures in black and white terms, hero or villain, builder or destroyer. But the story of Lyndhurst shatters this template. This is the story not of a palace, but of a fortress. Jay Gould bought this house not to throw balls, as the Vanderbilts or Astors did. He bought it to hide. While other magnates built their mansions on Fifth Avenue, flaunting their wealth, Gould chose seclusion on the high bank of the Hudson. He did not travel by train, although he owned tens of thousands of kilometers of railroads. Do you know why? He feared assassination attempts. Every morning he boarded his steam yacht, Atalanta, the fastest in the world at the time, and sailed to Manhattan by water to avoid encountering people whose lives he had ruined with his financial machinations. The contrast between the external image and the internal reality here is simply staggering. On the outside, a robber baron, the man who crashed the gold market on Black Friday in 1869 and ruined thousands of families for his own profit. Inside Lyndhurst, a caring father who read books to his children for hours and personally tended to rare orchids in his greenhouse. How could such polar qualities coexist in one person? Was he a sociopath who skillfully wore a mask? Or did the world simply not want to see the human in him? The house's architecture perfectly reflects this duality. Lyndhurst is a masterpiece of neo-Gothic design by Alexander Jackson Davis. It is full of shadows, unexpected turns, and asymmetry. This is a labyrinth house, a puzzle house. As you walk through its corridors, you feel the space pressing on you with its grandeur, yet at the same time creating a strange sense of security. This is not just a building of stone and glass. It is a psychological portrait of its owner, frozen in architecture. But to understand how this most hated man in America ended up in this castle, and why this particular house became his final refuge, we need to rewind time. We need to understand where this icy determination and thirst for control came from. After all, Jay Gould was not born a monster, and he was not born rich. His story begins not in a golden cradle, but in harsh poverty, among the rocky fields of the Catskill Mountains, where survival was the only form of success. No one knew that the boy who went to school barefoot would one day buy this castle with all its contents simply by writing a check and close its doors in the face of all of New York high society. We set off into the dark corridors of Lyndhurst.
We will peek into the library where financial wars were planned, and into the greenhouse where thousands of orchids bloomed. We will see how ambition turns into isolation, and wealth into a golden cage. But first, let's go back to the beginning, to the moment when young Jay Gould first realized, in this world, you are either the hunter or the prey. And he made his choice. We are transported to 1836, to the hamlet of Roxbury, lost among the harsh ridges of the Catskill Mountains. There is no marble, no gilding, no orchids here. There is only gray sky, rocky soil that breaks plows, and endless, exhausting labor. It was here that Jason Gould was born, the man destined to become the architect of the modern American corporate system. He was the only son in the family of farmer John Burr Gould, and from his very first breath, he seemed like a freak of nature in this land of physical strength. Small, sickly, with thin bones and a perpetual cough, Jay was utterly unsuited for farm life. His father looked at him with pity, his neighbors with mockery. In a world where respect was measured by the ability to lift a sack of grain or tame a horse, Jay was nobody. But the boy had one weapon that no one in Roxbury took seriously: a phenomenal, frighteningly cold intellect. He hated the farm's dirt. He hated the smell of manure, and, looking at his father's hunched back, he made a vow to himself that defined his entire life. He would never be a slave to the land. He would make the land work for him. His first strategy was not accumulating money, but accumulating information. While his peers learned to plow, Jay Gould learned to survey. He became fascinated with geodesy and cartography. This seems like a boring choice for a future financial predator, but look deeper. What was a map in the mid-19th century? It was power. He who knows the landscape, he who knows where the road will go, controls the future.
At the age of just 16, with 50 cents in his pocket and a change of underwear, he left home to survey the counties of New York. Imagine this scrawny teenager who walks hundreds of kilometers on foot through the counties of Albany, Delaware, and Ulster. He knocks on farmers' doors, sells subscriptions to his maps, sleeps wherever he can, eats once a day. But in the process, he does something more important. He learns to see the structure of the economy from a bird's-eye view. He sees not just hills and rivers, he sees potential railroad routes, sites for factories, arteries of trade. He creates in his mind a matrix that later allows him to see financial flows as clearly as he saw riverbeds on his drawings. By the age of 20, he had already earned $5,000, a sum his father never saw in his entire life. But this was only the beginning. Ambition led him into the tanning business. And here we see the first manifestation of what historians would later call the Gould method. He finds a partner, Zadok Pratt, a legendary tanner, an old-school man, rich and respected. Gould convinces him to open a new production in Pennsylvania, in a place where dense hemlock forests grew, the bark of which is necessary for tanning leather. Pratt provides the money, Gould provides the energy. An entire town emerges, Gouldsboro. Note this name. The boy is only 20 years old, and he already names the town after himself. Ego? Undoubtedly. But also a statement of intent. However, the partnership with Pratt quickly fell apart. Pratt, an honest and straightforward man, was shocked by the complex financial schemes of his young protege. He did not understand Gould's bookkeeping. It seemed to him that the numbers were dancing. Pratt withdrew from the business, frightened by the incomprehensible mind of his partner. But another man took his place, and this became the first real tragedy in Gould's career.
a tragedy that forever colored his reputation in shades of blood. The new partner was Charles Loop, a wealthy New York leather merchant, a representative of old money, a patron of the arts, a man of refined sensitivity. He was everything Gould was not: a favorite of society, an aesthete, an heir to traditions. Gould used Loop's capital to buy up all the hides on the market before the crisis of 1857. It was a brilliant but risky play. When the panic of 1857 struck, the market collapsed. Loop, unaccustomed to the brutality of stock market crashes, found himself in a state of deep psychological shock. He watched his fortune melt away, his reputation crumble. Gould, however, remained icy. For him, the crisis was just an equation to solve. He pressured Loop, demanding new investments, demanding tough measures, demanding to go all in. The aristocrat's psyche could not withstand the clash with the merciless pragmatism of the farmer's son. In October 1859, in his luxurious mansion on Madison Avenue, Charles Loop took a pistol and shot himself in the heart. Society was horrified. New York accused Jay Gould himself of Loop's death. They said he had hounded his partner, squeezed him like a lemon, and thrown away the rind. Gould did not attend the funeral. Instead of mourning, he barricaded himself in the tannery in Gouldsboro, hired armed men, and physically repelled the attempt by Loop's heirs to seize the property. It was a real war, with rifles, barricades, and gunfire. And Gould won. He retained control. It was at this moment, on the eve of the Civil War, that Jay Gould's final philosophy took shape. He realized that the world is divided into those who feel and those who calculate. He chose to be one who calculates.
He understood that morality is a fiction for the poor, and for people of his scale, only the laws of physics and mathematics exist. He became an outcast. The doors of salons slammed shut before him, but the doors of banks opened even wider. Now, with capital, and more importantly, a complete absence of illusions about human nature, he turned his gaze to a new goal. Leather was too small, too dirty a business. True power lay in America's steel veins, in the railroads. But to enter this elite club, he needed not just intellect, he needed an alliance. He needed a connection to the world he despised, but in which he wanted to reign. And here, the story takes an unexpected turn. Into the life of the cold calculator enters a woman who would become the only person to see in him not a monster, but a genius. This marriage would change everything, and it would also lead him to the foot of Lyndhurst Castle. In 1863, in the midst of the Civil War, when the nation was tearing itself apart, Jay Gould made his most important strategic move. But this time, it was not a company takeover or stock market speculation. It was an alliance that saved his soul from complete disintegration. The man whom the press was already beginning to portray as a heartless automaton fell in love. His chosen one was Helen Day Miller, the daughter of a respectable and prosperous grocer on Fifth Avenue. This marriage seems like an incredible paradox. Helen was the embodiment of Victorian virtue, calm, deeply religious, gentle woman who valued domestic comfort above all. Gould was a volcano of ambition and nervous energy. Why did Helen's father, Daniel Miller, bless this marriage, knowing the scandalous reputation of the groom after Loop's suicide? Perhaps he, like his daughter, discerned in this quiet young man that steel core which would soon subjugate the entire American economy. Helen became for Gould not just a wife, but the only safe harbor in the ocean of hatred that he himself created around him. She gave him what he had never had:
unconditional acceptance. And for her, for creating an ideal world for her and their future children, he was ready to declare war on all the rest of humanity. It was precisely during this period that Gould entered his most famous alliance, which would forever inscribe his name in the Black Book of Wall Street history. He finds partners as unscrupulous as himself, but far more flamboyant. Jim Fisk, a former circus performer and salesman, and Daniel Drew, a cunning old speculator. Together, this trio challenges Cornelius Vanderbilt himself, America's richest man, in the battle for control of the Erie Railroad. This confrontation, which entered textbooks as the Erie War, became the first major clash between old and new money. Vanderbilt was trying to buy up Erie shares to seize the company. Gould responded with a strategy that was genius in its simplicity and monstrous in its audacity. He simply printed new shares. While Vanderbilt spent millions buying up papers, Gould printed new certificates in the office basement, diluting the Commodore's stake. Vanderbilt was buying air. When the dust settled, Gould and his partners stole millions from the old lion, forcing him to retreat. It was a victory, but a Pyrrhic one. From that moment, Jay Gould ceased to be just a businessman. He became an outcast. Society closed the doors of all decent clubs to him. His name became a curse. And here we approach the turning point. For the man hated by all of New York, he needs a place where he can remove his armor. He needs not just a house, but a castle. He needs a fortress that will stand apart from the hustle and bustle, yet tower over it. In 1880, Gould's gaze falls on the estate in Terrytown, which already had its own dramatic history. This house, which we now know as Lyndhurst, was not built by Gould. It was created 40 years before his arrival, and its history remarkably echoed the fate of Jay himself. Initially, it was a villa called Knoll, built in 1838 by architect Alexander Jackson Davis for New York Mayor William Paulding. Even then, the house was a challenge. In an era when everyone built neat white boxes in classical style, Davis created an asymmetrical, gloomy Gothic mansion from gray stone quarried at Sing Sing prison. Critics laughed at it, calling it Paulding's Folly. In 1864, merchant George Merritt bought the house. He doubled the size of the building, adding an impressive tower that became the dominant feature of the entire landscape, and renamed the estate Lyndhurst, in honor of the mighty lindens growing on the property. Merritt turned the modest villa into a true palace. He invited the same architect, Davis, so that the expansion would look organic. This was a rare occurrence in architecture. The creator returned to his creation after a quarter of a century to bring it to perfection. When Jay Gould acquired this estate from Merritt's widow for $250,000, he bought not just walls. He bought a ready-made set for his life. The merging of worlds happened instantly. America's most modern mind, the man of telegraph and railroads, settled in a house that looked to the medieval past. It was perfect camouflage. Outside, a romantic castle, symbol of chivalry and nobility. Inside, the headquarters of the man who controlled 15% of all US railroads and could crash the national economy with one telegraph order. The purchase was made turnkey. Gould acquired the house along with the furniture, paintings, library, and even the bed linen of the previous owners. This tells us a great deal. He had no time or desire to create his style from scratch. Like a true conqueror, he simply occupied someone else's throne. He shortened the name from Lindenhurst to the sharper, shorter Lyndhurst. Extra syllables were unnecessary for him. Imagine this moment. A small steam yacht docks at the Hudson shore. From it steps a short man with a black beard, leading his beloved Helen by the hand. They ascend the green slope to the gray stone giant awaiting them at the hilltop. The castle tower pierces the low clouds. Stained glass windows glow with the setting sun like dragon's eyes. To the whole world, this man is the devil heading to his lair. But to Helen, he is simply a tired husband who has finally come home. Gould looks at the Hudson, the wide, majestic river, and understands. Here, no one can reach him. Here, he sets the rules. But the house he bought was not just a refuge. It was the most complex architectural machine, which began to influence Gould's own psychology. Gothic vaults, narrow corridors, play of light and shadow. All this resonated with his secretive nature. Lyndhurst became not just a backdrop, but an active participant in the drama. If on Wall Street Gould built empires of paper and steel, here he began to build an empire of beauty and living nature, perhaps trying to buy off eternity for his sins. And the center of this new empire, hidden from prying eyes, was not the stock exchange, but the greenhouse. But before we enter this glass temple, we need to understand how the house itself is structured, which became a mirror of its owner's soul. Let's cross the threshold of this stone labyrinth. As soon as the massive oak doors of Lyndhurst close behind you, the outside world ceases to exist. You find yourself in a space where time flows by different laws. The first thing that strikes the senses is not the gleam of gold, but a dense, almost tangible silence and twilight light.
Alexander Jackson Davis, the architect, designed this house not to let in the sun, but to create atmosphere. Narrow, pointed arch windows shatter the daylight into thin rays that snatch dancing dust particles from the semi-darkness. The smell here is special. A mixture of old varnished wood, beeswax, and a barely perceptible aroma of fading flowers. We enter the vestibule, and here awaits the main psychological discovery, the key to understanding Jay Gould's personality. Look at these majestic columns supporting the ribbed vaults. Look at the marble walls in warm cream and ochre tones. They look solid, eternal, expensive. But come closer. Touch the marble. It is warm. This is not stone. This is pine. Every centimeter of these stone vaults is an intricate imitation, a technique known as faux painting. Masters painted the wood for hours to make it look like the rarest Italian marble. Gould's critics would say this proves his falseness. The king of fake shares lives in a fake castle. But the psychology here is deeper. Gould knew the difference between appearance and essence. Wood is warmer than stone. It holds sound better. It creates coziness while maintaining an appearance of grandeur. This is a metaphor for his entire life. He created a reality that was convenient for him, but looked as society required. He did not obey the rules of the material. He made the material pretend to be what he wanted. Let's proceed further to the heart of the house, the library. This is a small room by modern standards, but it was here that the heart of the American economy of the 1880s beat. Dark bookshelves from floor to ceiling, stuffed with volumes on history, botany, and philosophy. Gould was not an uneducated parvenu. He was a self-taught intellectual. In the center of the room stands a massive table. Imagine him here, a small figure in an armchair, the light of a gas lamp falling on papers. Here, into this silence, messages arrived via a special telegraph wire that the next morning caused panic on the exchanges in Chicago and London. The contrast is staggering. In this almost monastic cell, one man suffering from insomnia and neuralgia moved pieces on the global chessboard.
The walls of this room heard whispers of conspiracies worth millions of dollars, but they never betrayed their secrets. From the intimacy of the library, we move to the art gallery, a vast space added by the previous owner, Merritt. Gould preserved it, and this is another stroke to the portrait. The gallery is filled with paintings by French academicians, Bouguereau, Corot, Courbet. This is safe, conservative art. There are no provocations here. Gould, the destroyer in business, sought harmony and peace in art. He could stand for hours before a canvas depicting a pastoral scene, escaping into a painted world where there were no prosecutors or enraged shareholders. But the true soul of Jay Gould, his genuine passion and his most grandiose creation, was not within the stone walls, but outside. If you exit through the back veranda and walk along the manicured park paths, you will see a gigantic skeleton of glass and steel sparkling in the sun. This is Lyndhurst's greenhouse. When Gould bought the estate, the old wooden greenhouse burned down, ironically shortly after his move. Instead of being upset, he saw an opportunity. He hired the firm Lord & Burnham and ordered something unprecedented. In 1881, the first steel-framed winter garden in the United States rose here. Length, nearly 120 meters. Glass area, more than 2,500 square meters. It was a cathedral dedicated to plants. The numbers here are important because they show the scale of his obsession. Gould's collection numbered more than 8,000 plants. He assembled the world's largest collection of orchids and palms. Think about it. The man called a robber baron, the most heartless creature on Earth, spent hours tending to the planet's most fragile and capricious flowers. Orchids. Why them specifically? Psychologists could find a wealth of meanings here. Orchids are often epiphytes, plants that live on other trees but do not kill them, using them only as support. They are beautiful, complex, mysterious, and require total climate control. Gould created an artificial paradise for them. In this greenhouse, he was not Mephistopheles. He was God. He controlled the temperature, humidity, light. Here, everything obeyed his will, and unlike the people on Wall Street, the plants responded to his care with pure beauty, not betrayal. Contemporaries described surreal scenes. Jay Gould, pale and worn out by illness, walking among palms as tall as a 3-story house, gently touching the petals of a rare Vanda orchid whose value exceeded his gardener's annual earnings. This was a world within a world, a glass utopia. But Lyndhurst was also a golden cage. The dining room windows overlooked the river, but they were always draped with heavy curtains. Gould disliked open spaces where he could become a target. Even in his paradise, he could not rid himself of paranoia. Guards patrolled the perimeter of the 67-acre park around the clock. Every bush could hide an assassin. Every ship on the river could bring enemies. The grandeur of this house oppressed. The dining room, with its heavy carved ceiling and dark wooden panels, resembled not a place for family dinners, but a hall for tribunal sessions. And yet, it was precisely here, amid this Gothic heaviness, that the only genuine part of Gould's life unfolded. Love for his children, love for Helen. But architecture has a way of predicting fate. Gothic style is the style of memento mori. Pointed arches stretch upward to the sky, but they also remind of crypts. Lyndhurst, this masterpiece of stone and glass, was built for centuries, but its owner's body was made of far more fragile material. The clock in the tall tower counted time not only to the stock exchange opening, but also to the moment when all this power and splendor would be powerless before a simple biological tragedy. And this moment approached with the inevitability of a locomotive hurtling off the tracks. The shadow already stood on the threshold of the vestibule. By 1889, Jay Gould owned almost everything to which a price tag could be attached. His fortune was estimated at $72 million. In modern terms, that's tens of billions. He could buy any railroad, bankrupt any corporation, hire the best armies of lawyers. But in the high rooms of Lyndhurst, saturated with the smell of wax and old paper, a tragedy unfolded that no check could stop. America's most hated man faced an enemy with whom one cannot negotiate and whom one cannot bribe. This enemy was inside his own chest. Tuberculosis. Consumption, as it was called at the time. The disease of poets and the poor, which made no distinction between New York slums and Gothic castles in Terrytown. Gould was fading. His already fragile body was withering, turning into a shadow. The man whose will was stronger than the steel from which his bridges were built now could not climb the stairs of his own house without shortness of breath. But the real blow that broke the spine of this titan was not his own illness. It was the death of his guardian angel. On January 13, 1889, Helen Gould died. The woman who was the only person in the world who knew Jay not as Mephistopheles, but as a loving husband. She died of a stroke. This was the moment of truth, that very moral turning point which makes us, the observers, freeze in confusion. We are used to hating Gould. History has taught us to see him as a monster. But look at the eyewitness accounts on the day of the funeral. The man who watched the ruin of thousands with icy calm sobbed over his wife's coffin like a child. At Woodlawn Cemetery, as the coffin was being lowered into the ground, Gould fainted. He had to be carried out in arms. At that moment, the robber baron mask cracked, and beneath it was simply a grief-stricken, terminally ill man. Can one sympathize with a villain? Can one forgive a predator his sins just because he is capable of deep love? Lyndhurst, conceived as a fortress for the family, instantly turned into a luxurious mausoleum. Without Helen, this house lost its meaning. The grandeur of the Gothic vaults, which had previously seemed like protection, now oppressed with emptiness. Gould wandered the corridors, listening to the silence, and perhaps for the first time in his life asked himself, what was all this for? It was at this very moment that a new key character steps onto the stage. His eldest daughter, Helen. At 21 years old, she effectively became the mistress of Lyndhurst. But Helen was not just an heiress. She became the living embodiment of her father's conscience. If Jay Gould was a machine for making money, then his daughter became a machine for giving it away. She saw her father's pain. She saw society's hatred of their family name, and it seems she decided to atone for the sins of the lineage. The relationship between the dying father and daughter in these final years is the most poignant part of Lyndhurst's story. They walked in the park, he leaning on her arm, a small, coughing old man surrounded by his majestic trees. He taught her business, but she taught him humanity. Helen did not reject her father, as often happens in stories of evil magnates. On the contrary, she surrounded him with such care that even the most cynical reporters fell silent. Gould understood that the end was near, and here emerged his last, perhaps the darkest irony. He began preparing for death as meticulously as for a corporate merger. He personally approved the design of the family mausoleum at Woodlawn Cemetery. He wanted his final home to be perfect. He chose not Gothic, like at Lyndhurst, but a classical Greek temple. strict, cold, eternal. Without windows, without doors for outsiders. The mausoleum cost him $100,000, but while the crypt was being built, Gould continued to fight. He did not give up. Doctors forbade him from working, but he secretly slipped into the library to read exchange summaries. This was the agony of a man who did not know how to live without struggle. He tried to control his railroads with trembling hands, but the world was already changing. A new era was dawning, an era where lone pirates like him had no place. Corporations were becoming faceless bureaucratic machines. The era of personalities was fading, along with the blood he coughed up into monogrammed snow-white handkerchiefs.
In these last months at Lyndhurst, a strange atmosphere reigned. On one hand, incredible luxury, blooming orchids, liveried servants. On the other, the smell of medicines and the anticipation of the inevitable. Gould stopped going out to the river. He spent time in the greenhouse, sitting among his favorite palms. They say he talked to the plants, perhaps because they, unlike people, never asked him for money and never judged him. We see a man who reached the absolute pinnacle of material success. He defeated all competitors. He built a castle. He created a paradise garden. But he was absolutely, totally alone in the face of death. His millions could not buy him an extra day of life. His power could not bring back his wife. And this paradox between external omnipotence and internal helplessness becomes the main theme of the finale of his life. On December 2nd, 1892, Jay Gould died in his New York City house. But his spirit remained forever tied to Lyndhurst. He was only 56 years old. Newspapers came out with headlines that did not hide their gloating. Shares of his companies soared. The market believed that without Mephistopheles, business would become more stable. This was society's final spit in the face of the man who created it. But the story does not end here. Gould's death became not the finale, but the beginning of a massive crisis and transformation for Lyndhurst itself. The castle was orphaned, and now, before his heirs, stood the question that torments all children of great and terrible parents. What to do with this legacy? Burn it? Hide it? Or try to turn the cursed gold into something bright? Helen Gould stood on the threshold of this decision, and her choice would determine the fate of the estate for the next half-century. After Jay Gould's death in December 1892, a deafening silence hung over Lyndhurst. But it was the silence before the storm. Mephistopheles' will turned out to be as strategically calculated as his stock market operations. He left his entire fortune, those very $72 million, to his 6 children, but with a strict condition. The capital must remain undivided, under family management. He dreamed of creating a dynasty, a clan that would rule America for centuries, like the Rothschilds in Europe. But Gould, the great mathematician of human weaknesses, made one mistake. He did not account for the fact that his children would want not power, but what they had never had: recognition and redemption. Here, the story of Lyndhurst splits into 2 completely different but intertwining lines, embodied by his 2 daughters, Helen and Anna. Helen Gould, the eldest daughter, remained at Lyndhurst. For her, the castle became a monastery, and her father's money a tool of penance. She seemed to try to wash the name Gould clean of dirt and hatred. Imagine this contrast. Where the father posted armed guards and set dogs on uninvited guests, Helen opened the gates. She organized a sewing school for poor girls on the estate grounds,
Ponder this image. Children of immigrants and workers sit on the lawns of that very house which was built on money squeezed from their fathers. Helen donated colossal sums to universities, churches, and aid for disaster victims. She became the Angel of the Hudson. She transformed Lyndhurst from a symbol of greed into a center of philanthropy. But was she happy? Helen married late, at 45, to a railroad employee and devoted herself to raising adopted children. She chose the path of service, trying to atone for her father's sins. The younger daughter, Anna, chose a completely different trajectory. If Helen sought sanctity, Anna sought greatness. She understood that in democratic America, the Gould name would always be associated with new money and scandals. Therefore, she turned her gaze across the ocean to old Europe, where titles could override any whiff of money. In 1895, Anna made a deal that shocked high society. She married French aristocrat Count Boniface de Castellane, known as Bonnie. It was a marriage of convenience on both sides. Anna bought a title and entry into high society, while the impoverished Count bought access to the bottomless pockets of the Goulds. Anna moved to Paris, and there began an orgy of consumption that would probably have made the miserly Jay Gould turn in his grave. Bonnie de Castellane did not just spend money, he burned it. In just a few years of marriage, he squandered more than $10 million from the Gould inheritance. With this money, he built the famous Pink Palace in Paris, a copy of the Grand Trianon at Versailles. He threw balls where footmen in powdered wigs served the guests, and elephants roamed the gardens. Anna became a countess, an icon of Belle Époque style. But behind closed doors, her life turned into hell. Bonnie cheated on her openly, despised her American origins, and spent her fortune on mistresses and antiques. The crisis came in 1906. Anna, who had inherited her father's steel character, did what no one expected of her. She filed for divorce. In those days, this was a monumental scandal. She did not just leave, she cut off the financial flow. The Pink Palace stood empty, Bonnie left with nothing. But Anna did not return to America defeated. She went even further. Soon, she married her ex-husband's cousin, the Duke Élie de Talleyrand-Périgord. Now she became a duchess. She ascended to a social pinnacle unattainable for her father's critics. Meanwhile, in Terrytown, Helen's era was drawing to a close. In 1938, the saintly Helen died. Lyndhurst was orphaned again. It seemed the house's story was over. The Great Depression was raging, old estates were crumbling, taxes were rising, and no one wanted to maintain a gigantic Gothic castle. Local authorities were already discussing demolition plans. In 1939, as Europe stood on the brink of World War II, the Duchess Talleyrand, née Anna Gould, returned home. She had spent more than 40 years in France. She had left as a young girl seeking recognition and returned as a 70-year-old widow who had survived 2 wars, 2 marriages, and the loss of illusions. Anna saw Lyndhurst with new eyes. For her, it was no longer a place to flee from. It was an ark. She brought back from Europe not only her title, but mountains of antiques, Louis-era furniture, paintings, and tapestries. The Gothic castle of the American baron merged with the luxury of French aristocracy. Anna filled Jay Gould's gloomy halls with the spirit of Versailles. But the main change occurred in her consciousness. Anna understood what her father never had time to grasp. Wealth has no meaning if it serves only its owner. Owning such a house in the 20th century became not a privilege, but a burden and responsibility. She had seen the old world collapse in Europe, bombs destroy palaces, and realized the only form of immortality is preservation. In her final years, Anna, the last of the Goulds, lived in Lyndhurst almost as a recluse. She slept during the day and stayed awake at night, wandering through the halls where epochs mingled. She saw how America had changed. Robber barons became legend. Hatred for her father turned into historical curiosity. And she made a decision that became an act of transcendence, a transition from personal ownership to public domain. She did not bequeath the house to her children. She understood that they would sell it off in pieces or be unable to maintain it. She decided to give the house to history. This was the moment of truth for the entire dynasty. Money earned by the most ruthless capitalist of the 19th century. Money that destroyed fates and built monopolies. Money that was spent on Paris balls and titles, ultimately crystallized into this monument. Anna understood that Lyndhurst no longer belonged to her. It belonged to time. When Anna died in 1961, she left behind not just real estate. She left a time capsule. The house was transferred to the National Trust for Historic Preservation. The gates that Jay Gould had closed to the world in 1880 now had to open forever. The circle closed. The predator built a fortress. The saint tried to pray it away, and the Duchess turned it into a museum. The story of hatred transformed into a story of beauty. But before we leave this house, we need to draw the final conclusion. We need to understand what Lyndhurst whispers to us today as we walk on its parquet where the foot of America's most hated man once stepped. Today, as you pass through the wrought iron gates of Lyndhurst, the first thing you feel is a strange dissonance. You expect to see a monument to greed, the dark lair of that very robber baron with which children were frightened. But instead, you are met by beauty of such piercing power that it literally takes your breath away. 67 acres of emerald lawns, majestic lindens that remember the touch of Anna Gould's hands, and this incredible silhouette of the castle, cutting a jagged outline of a dream against the sky. And here, in the finale of our journey, we confront the main lesson of this story. A story that turned from a criminal chronicle of the 19th century into a philosophical parable for the 21st. What is legacy? We are used to thinking that legacy is what they write about us in obituaries. Jay Gould died as America's most hated man. If you had asked any passerby on a New York street in 1892 what would remain of Gould, they would have answered, only the ruins of ruined companies and the curses of widows. But look around. There are no ruins. There is Lyndhurst. There is the New York subway system, the foundations of which he laid. There is Western Union, which he turned into a global network. History performed an amazing somersault. Time, this great and cynical judge. Today, we do not feel the pain of those he ruined during the stock exchange panic. Those tears dried up 100 years ago. But the beauty he bought and preserved remains. This is the cruel truth we are reluctant to admit. Art and architecture often outlive the morality of their creators. We admire the pyramids, forgetting the slaves. We admire Lyndhurst, forgetting Black Friday. It turns out that stone remembers aesthetics, but not ethics. This story is frighteningly relevant to us today. Look at modern industry titans, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg. We see the same patterns. They create the infrastructure of our world, as Gould created railroads and telegraph. They possess power exceeding that of governments, and they provoke the same polarized reaction, from fanatical worship to fierce hatred. Jay Gould was the first in this line. He was the archetype of the modern technocrat, cold, efficient, living in numbers rather than emotions. Lyndhurst is proof that even the most rational minds need a refuge from the world they themselves created. There is another literary parallel that cannot be ignored. Looking at Lyndhurst, one cannot help but recall another Jay Gatsby. Fitzgerald's great novel was written later, but the archetype is the same. A man from nowhere, with a dark past, builds a fantastic castle to create his own world. But there is a key difference. Gatsby built his house to attract attention, to win back his beloved through external splendor. Gould bought Lyndhurst to hide. Gatsby was a romantic who died from his dream. Gould was a realist who survived, but paid for it with complete loneliness. Lyndhurst is West Egg, where parties were never held. It is the Snow Queen's castle, where Kai assembled the word eternity from icy cubes of stocks and bonds. Walk those same corridors today. Notice how the light falls on the faux marble columns. Now we understand this symbol differently. It is not just a fake. This is the triumph of human will over material. Gould did not simply accept the world as it is, he rewrote it. If pine can become marble, then a farmer's son can become a king. This is the American dream in its purest and most terrifying form. The possibility of complete transformation, the price of which is your soul. In the house library, his desk still stands to this day. It seems as if he stepped out from there a minute ago. If you listen closely, you can hear the ticking of the clocks. Those very clocks that measured his life, full of struggle. What was he thinking in his last days? Did he regret his cruelty? Or, looking at his orchids, did he believe that the end justifies the means? We will never know the answer. Jay Gould left no memoirs. He did not try to justify himself. He left us only this house. And perhaps that is his true answer. As you leave Lyndhurst, turn around. Look at the tall tower one last time. Imagine a small figure of a man standing by the window, looking at the Hudson. Did he win the game of capitalism, but lose the game of humanity? Or perhaps it is precisely the ability to create such an oasis of beauty amid chaos that makes him human. The story of Jay Gould and his house teaches us that light and darkness are inseparable. Lyndhurst stands as a monument to this contradiction. It is a house built on hatred, but preserved by love. It is a place where the coldest calculations coexisted with the most tender flowers. And in the end, all the millions of dollars, all the railroads, all the gold bars dissolved in the flow of time. What remains is only what cannot be put in a bank. The silence of the park, the shadow from the Gothic arch, and the smell of old books.